Hey everyone, welcome back to Great Sports Debates. We're about halfway through the season almost, and we're going to get an early jump on these power rankings before the Monday night game, so keep that in mind. But I think it's obvious at number 32, it's still the New England Patriots. Although Drake May looks like he might be good, part of the problem we talked about with him coming out was his consistency. And it's going to be hard to judge how much is him and how much is it that they have a terrible offensive line, a terrible defensive line. It's hard for them to protect the quarterback. They can't rush a quarterback, and it's hard to win any games like that. At 31 is Cleveland. They're kind of in the same spot offensively, just not a good line, not a strong team. Watson's played horrible. He's out for the season. I don't know how much of an improvement, if any, there will be from that. Haven't been impressed by that team at all this season. At number 30 is the Miami Dolphins. Once again, they score like 10 points. They lost to the Colts. And it's really a miracle that they have 2 wins at all. I know the Jacksonville game they got outplayed and were lucky to win. I don't even remember their other win. I think it's against New England or some other really bad team. But they've had a pretty soft schedule and they only have 2 wins. And it's just not looking good for Miami. And this just goes to show that, all these players, it's not just about the skill guys. If you can't block, if you can't generate pressure, if you can't do anything, you're going to lose games. At number 29 is Tennessee. And it almost feels like a sin having Tennessee so high. But just look at the other teams I've mentioned. Will Levis is a disaster. They're trying to improve the offensive line, but it's still not great. The defense is a joke. They're getting 40 bombs dropped on them left and right. And the team has 1 win on the season. And rounding out the really bad teams is another team that somehow has 2 wins. The Las Vegas Raiders, which I unfortunately get to see more than I want to. So the tight end they drafted looks like he might be pretty good. But again, you didn't address the quarterback. You didn't address offensive line. And because of those 2 things, the offense is never going to look good. And then you got rid of Adams, which I think was a good move because he's only getting older and more expensive. And they weren't going to be good anytime soon. Now they have the question, do you trade somebody like Crosby? That's a tough one because he's young and he's a stud. And, what do you hope to get trading him? Like, the idea of a draft pick is you get lucky and you get somebody like Crosby. So, if I was the Raiders, I probably would not trade Crosby. But, as a fan, I'd be happy if he went to the Detroit Lions. Alright, at number 27, it is the Carolina Panthers. Again, I know they've only won 1 game, and it was against the Raiders. But the offense has looked better since Bryce Young was benched. Although we're starting to see more of the red rifle I was expecting. The defense is a hot mess. So again, by no means is this team good. They're just 27th because there's some really bad teams this year. Alright, at 26, a step above these other teams, but that's not saying a whole lot. It's your New York Football Giants. And this team is really just kind of a disaster. Daniel Jones, he can move with his legs a little bit. He can make some great throws. But his consistency and decision making is rough. The offensive line is improved, but still not that good. They do have some good players on their defense. But the defense as a whole isn't that great. And part of that is just because they have to be on the field so much because the offense can't do anything. So they have guys, we like Neighbors. We like Lawrence. There's, Jackson. They got a lot of good guys. Well, they have some good guys on that team. But I don't see them being a factor in the league this year. Speaking of non-factor teams that some people thought were going to be Super Bowl or playoff contenders is the Jets. And what I said the whole off season is no matter how great Aaron Rodgers is, and we know he's in advanced age, he was coming off an injury, he hadn't played in a while, you have to remember you need time to throw the ball. The Jets played better than the score would indicate against Pittsburgh, especially early in the game. They were moving the ball really well. I'm hoping that the Adams move helps them out a little bit. And they are in a really soft division. But they're 2-5. And the defense hasn't played as well as we expected. Maybe that's because they've been on the field all the time. Maybe it's just because they've come back down to earth a little bit. But the Jets seem to be a non-factor for sure. At 24 is Jacksonville. It's a shame they kind of sleptwalk through the end of last year and the beginning of this year. Not really sure what the problem is. Trevor Lawrence appears to have a lot of time most of the times he throws. Maybe he's just not going to be that good of a quarterback. Obviously, he can make all the great throws, but he just doesn't do so all the time. So they're a team that I'm not really sure about. And the biggest change I've seen from last year when they're at 8-3 or wherever they were at one point to where they are now is the pass rush is not the same. It's literally the opposite. So they're going to need to figure that out on the defensive side. And people just keep waiting for this leap that just might not happen for Lawrence in the offense. At 23 is the LA Rams. Again, this is a team that just has a boatload of injuries. I still don't think, they're the 30th team or write them off dead like some people were talking about a couple games into the season. But, they're just not a strong team because they don't have a good defense and they have too many pieces down. They're trying to play smart and play to their strengths. They're trying to get the running game going. And, as they continue to get pieces back on the offensive line, maybe they can get that run-pass balance where the offense plays well enough that they beat some of the teams despite some of the deficiencies that they have on defense. At 22 is the Cardinals. It's just a tough team to figure out. Probably not that high, but they were pretty strong and impressive early on in the season. This is a tough team to figure out. They have a lot of young players. They have guys like Kyler Murray that can make big splash plays and electric athletes like Marvin Harrison Jr. But the defense allows too many points and it puts a lot of pressure on these guys to produce. At 21 is the Cincinnati Bengals. They're 3-4. I honestly don't think they're this good. Part of what I was talking about is they had a really insanely soft schedule part that they're in right now. But even during that, they beat the Browns 21-14 and didn't look like they knew what they were doing in that game. They beat the Giants 14-7 in a really ugly game that looked like nobody wanted to win. So the Bengals really haven't turned the corner. The offense looked good against Baltimore and I think the week before that. But other than that, the offense hasn't been super great and the defense is terrible. Although Hendricks has come on as of late, and he's a key factor. I don't think that they're going to trade anybody because I think they're going to try to get into the playoffs, which isn't as long of a shot as it seems. Like I said, now they're 3-4, so that's going to give them probably more confidence than they should have. But even if they do get in, they're not going to win any games. At number 20 is the Saints. Again, this is another team where I feel it's too high, but look at the teams beneath them. 2-5. They've lost 5 in a row. Not really sure what's going on the offense. We called that they were going to lose, this last week against Denver because all their wide receivers are out, the starting quarterback's out. You're missing a lot of pieces. And now Alvin Kamara is asking for a trade, and I kind of get it because you'd think they'd be utilizing him more when they're down so many pieces. But they haven't, and he hasn't been able to have many holes to run through, so kind of curious what they'd be able to get for him. Plus, if he can get to a team where he gets more touches and more potential, that's better for us. As you know, we said in the offseason, his going over 660 yards rushing was one of our picks, so I think we'll get there either way. but something to monitor. If they do trade Kamara, it shows that they're totally giving up on the season. And at 2-5, that might be something that they want to consider, because I know they already have games, against Tampa Bay or Atlanta, and I don't think that they're going to be able to catch both of those teams. At 19 is the Colts. Again, don't want to sound like a broken record, but not a team that I'm overly impressed with. They have a good offensive line. It's questionable, with the old man at quarterback. And they got enough pieces to get the job done. So it's kind of concerning that it looks like the Colts have done better with their backup quarterbacks, both this year and last year. But, we knew AR was a project when they drafted him. He just has some freak stuff that is going to be good no matter what, with the cannon arm and the size and the speed and the strength that guy has. It's always going to be dangerous for a defense. If he can figure out the other stuff, this guy could be a legend. But he's so far from that, it remains to be seen. At 18, we got the Dallas Cowboys. This team just doesn't look good. We said last week our top Gold Star special, take the Lions -3, take the Lions all day, alternative line, all kinds of stuff, the over. The Lions are going to win. They got to the over, but it was all on Detroit in that game. I really expected that Dallas would at least be able to throw the ball better against a not-so-great secondary in Detroit. The fact that they managed to lose 47-9, and it's not their first time getting blown out, makes it tough to have any belief in the Cowboys. But they beat the teams they're supposed to beat so far, and Dak has put up some pretty good yardage from the passing attack. But it's going to be tough to beat better teams when over half your defense is out, and they weren't that good against the run to begin with before anybody was out, and you can't run the ball. So old Jera is going to have to look to fix that. At 17 is the Broncos. So I've been lower than most on the Broncos all year, but you got to give them credit. They're 4-3. They beat some decently tough teams. They're very well coached. I like how they play to the strengths of the team. They try to run the ball, even though their initial starting running back wasn't having a lot of success. Bo Nix is, I underrated his dual threat abilities. Guy's fast, he knows how to pick up yards with his legs. He's still not a great thrower of the football, which is probably the most important thing as a quarterback and was my concern. But I think they put him in great spots with a lot of short passing and run pass options and a heavy run attack to make things easier for him. And if they can be decent, the defense has proven to be pretty good. All right, number 16, we have the LA Chargers. I feel like I just never see them play. I know, bye week and this and that, and they're playing today on Monday Night Football. But no matter how good their defense is, their offense just looks like it really struggles to make plays and score. So even though they're 3-2 and they beat a few good teams, I just don't have a lot of faith in the Chargers as far as like a playoff team. So let me know what you think in the comments. I'm not trusting the Chargers yet. All right, one of my disappointments of the season is I had some faith in Atlanta. I expected their division to not be so great. I mean, we knew Tampa Bay would be pretty tough. But I thought with the addition of Kirk Cousins, this was a team that was really going to shine. And they got beat down by Seattle. And, once you start getting the turnovers going, it's kind of tough. But I did expect more from the Falcons this year. They're 4-3. They can still turn it around. They're not that far out of the lead in that division. And we know it's going to come down to them and Tampa Bay at the end of the year. At 14 is the Seattle Seahawks. This is a tough team to figure out because they played some bad teams badly and hung with some tough teams and started off strong. And I don't know how serious the injury is to Metcalf. That'll be key because you see him on a few of those plays. I mean, he was like clearly covered and just throw it up to the big dude, and he's making things happen. So I like the way that they play. I like the way they try to run the ball. And then like I said, anytime you have a wide receiver like Metcalf that can just win even when he's completely covered. It's tough on teams. At 13 is the Bears. They're kind of a hard team to slate. I actually wanted to put them up a little higher, but I want to see them more tested as well. And they've improved dramatically each week, which is kind of scary as a Lions fan. You kind of wish you would have got Caleb a little earlier, because they really seem to be rolling on offense, and they already had a good defense. So, honestly, I had the Bears higher than most people most of the year. 13 is probably lower than a lot of people have them at this point now that they're rolling. And maybe they should be higher, but they're going to need to prove it next week first. At number 12, it's the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, maybe I'm going too high on the Eagles based on my potential of where I see they can be at. But like we said earlier in the season, I still think this can be a top-tier team. If the offensive line returns to somewhat of what they had been in the past couple of previous years, and they hand the ball to Saquon Barkley, that's kind of your magic formula there. And then the last thing they have to figure out is how to generate a pass rush. And the passing game's going to be fine if they're running the ball, especially when you have the wide receiving weapons they have. And A.J. Brown is just kind of one of those guys you can't guard, kind of like Metcalf and a couple other guys in the league where you just can't really guard them. And when you get into a tough spot late in the game, you can always take a chance, and he's going to win more times than not. At 11 is Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay's been a tough team that no one's talking about. They lost a couple of games, but Baker has put up some big numbers in multiple games. He likes Mike Evans, the big, tall, reliable weapon. He's got Godwin. They've been able to run the ball against some teams, which makes it tough. And they got a strong run defense. The Bucs have a lot of things going for them. I don't know if they have that wow factor that they're ever going to be a team I'm concerned with, where they have something that's super dynamic. But I do think that this is a team that can beat anyone on the right Sunday. At 10 is Pittsburgh. Maybe I dropped them too low after the Cowboys game, and that was really bad. But I do feel like Russell Wilson is going to give them a better chance moving forward. If you're not watching the games, it's not a crazy numbers difference, but the way he throws guys open and makes things happen, and I just think, obviously Russell Wilson's not some kind of savior. There's a reason he's on his third team, but I do think he's a better passer of the football than Justin Fields. Now, granted, you do lose, Wilson's mobile, but he ain't Justin Fields mobile, so you do lose that element to it. But I do think overall they're going to be a better team with Russell Wilson at quarterback. And all right, probably too high here, but I have the under 500 San Francisco 49ers at number 9. They haven't proved it yet. They haven't looked good yet. But I do think this is a team that's going to be tough to beat. I have said previously, I always thought, Ayuk was a little bit overrated and kind of the product of his environment. And it doesn't look good when he doesn't get too many targets. And when he does, they're bouncing off of his hands. But we got to remember, we still haven't seen this team at full strength. I get it. Nobody's at full strength in the NFL. But, you're missing guys like CMC, which I don't know if they'd be a huge difference because they have a really good run blocking line. But Purdy had a pretty bad game against Kansas City. But you got to remember, Kansas City's a lot better defensive team than people give them credit for. So that's a tough game. He's bound to have a bad game. We always say we don't think he's a top-tier quarterback, but he's usually smart and makes good decisions. But you're not going to play great every week in the NFL. And I think that they have too many playmakers to not figure it out. Although the defense looks not quite as good as it had in previous years past. So you can kind of look at some of those free agent losses, especially along the defensive line on the interior side, kind of see what we're talking about. At 8 is Buffalo. They're 5-2. They're not overly impressive. I'm not super scared of Buffalo, but they have a good running game, and when Josh Allen gets cooking, he can score on anybody. So they're always going to be a threat there. I still am not confident about how their defense shores up and handles things. So they have to take chances there. But I do like their young secondary pieces, especially at safety there. They've made a lot of good plays over the last few weeks that I've noticed and said, hey, this is keeping them in games. This is winning them games. At 7 is the Houston Texans, and this feels just about right for them because I do feel like they're better than all these teams that we've already talked about, but not quite at the level of some of the teams ahead of them. Although obviously they can play with anyone. They got CJ Stroud, and they got a decent offensive line protecting them. They can run the ball well, and when they have all their pieces, their offense can be pretty good. And then we're hoping that the defense continues to evolve on a pass rush we frankly expected more out of so far. And part of the problem with Houston is they've had to blitz a lot more than they probably planned to or previously had to try and generate a rush. So they're 5-2. They lost to Green Bay. I didn't really get to see that game. I'm going to try to watch that back and see how that played out. But the Texans are definitely a team that can play with anybody. At 6 is the team I've been telling you to bet the win of the division for 3 or 4 weeks now. You got to say, hey, this isn't a fluke. Just because they're the Commanders, this team's actually good. And, something of note, for everyone that's, Jaden Daniels, and he's a hell of a player, obviously. I mean, they were still moving the train with Mariota in there this week. So they got playmakers all over the field. The offensive line is finally gelling together right. They can do enough to get their run game going, and they're active up front on the defense. So there's a lot to like about the Washington Commanders, and the dual threat abilities of Jaden Daniels are something special. At 5 is Green Bay. I mean, you look at this division that they're in. All 4 of the teams are in the top 13. 3 of the 4 teams are in the top 5. And you can call it bias, but just look at what they've done to the teams they've played outside of their division. Look at their record as a whole as a division. And look at the quality of opponents that they beat. In fact, both of Houston's losses were to NFC North teams, both Green Bay and Minnesota. But as we said before, Green Bay has a strong offensive line, so they're going to be good no matter what. I mean, hell, Malik Willis looked good playing there for a couple of weeks. So that tells you all you need to know about the kind of protection that offensive line gives. So that's an offensive line that's not talked about a lot. That's very strong, especially on the passing side. And then when you get Jacobs going, running the ball, Jordan Love, if he's anything what people think he is, the next coming, that's a scary offense. All the wide receivers are young, fast, and were already broken by Aaron Rodgers, so they know what they're doing. The defense, they have some key playmakers. The secondary, the free agent signing, like we said, it was one of the top signings. It's even better than anyone expected. So Green Bay is going to be a tough out against anybody. And they kind of proved that with their run last year in the playoffs. At 4 is the Vikings. And the Vikings lost a very close game to the Lions. And that's the only game that they've lost all year. But we did tell you last week that we liked the Lions to win that game. And that we had the Lions ranked ahead of them before that game, despite the Vikings being undefeated at that point. The Vikings depend on generating pressure. So they're going to have to keep finding ways to get all the pressure that they got early on the season, but they have a lot of guys that can get to the quarterback. So that's what makes that team dangerous. And then on offense, and they have Aaron Jones. People have to pay attention to him because he's a special running back. And then when you start bringing guys in and you give Sam Darnold time, you give anybody time and they have enough weapons, that's an NFL caliber quarterback, they're going to look good. But like I said, Sam Darnold's coming back to earth a little bit. It's kind of scary for Vikings fans, but you got to remember, you got Justin Jefferson, who arguably the best wide receiver in the league. Anytime you're in trouble, you can always throw the ball up to that guy. And again, he's another one of those guys that more times than not is going to make the right play on the ball. At 3 is the Baltimore Ravens. We're dropping them one spot. Obviously they haven't played yet. And it's not anything they've done. We just really like the two teams at the top. You know, maybe the Ravens have a better claim to the top spot, but they are 4-2. They have some holes as well, especially the defense not being quite as strong as we expected. But any team with Lamar Jackson is always going to have a shot. The way he can throw and run the ball is amazing. And for all the people that say, hey, he's a running back and he's not that great actually just throwing the ball, he doesn't have to be, because part of what he does is running the ball and the threat of him running, which makes open lanes for guys. And he's really got a connection with Likely. You know, we know he's played well with Andrews before, and he has more playmakers around him than any time before. Most notably, King Henry, which I saw everyone is a great pickup, and people were saying crazy stuff in the offseason like, well, I don't know how they're going to make it work. Let's see. The Ravens are a team that like to run the ball, and they got a guy that really likes to get a lot of carries. My only concern with the Ravens were all the offensive linemen they lost in the offseason. But despite all of that, the offense still looks like it's rolling, and the Ravens are going to be a team to reckon with, like they are most years. Okay, at 2, we got the Detroit Lions. So, I moved them up one spot. They beat the Vikings. They're 5-1. However, it does feel a little bit high. And I think if the Lions were smart, and obviously they have the best front office in the league, so they're going to do anything in their power, even if they have to overpay here, because you never know what can happen to windows in the NFL. They got to get a standout pass rusher, because their pass rush is the biggest deficiency on his team. And if you have a team that's this skilled, this good on offense, that really needs a piece, you need to offer out and see who you can get to rush the passer, because they're going to need that come playoff time. And then obviously the top team, the Kansas City Chiefs, they're undefeated. They're not looking super great on the offensive side all the time, but they're getting the results that people are expecting. People always expect the Chiefs to win, and there's a reason for it. They got a great quarterback. They got a great interior offensive line. They're able to run on anybody with anybody. And Patrick Mahomes is going to make it work no matter who his weapons are. And then, like I said, they have one of the best defenses in the league as well. So, while the Chiefs aren't unbeatable, they're definitely a smart team, a good team, a well-coached team, and they're going to be a tough team to beat. They're 2-time defending Super Bowl champs for a reason. So, that's our rankings. Please subscribe if you hadn't. Like the video if you enjoyed it. And as always, thanks for watching.